don't think we're heading in the direction of a more anarchist society. But then I do have a lot of sympathy for the kind of view that Colin Ward articulated, which is one in which it's creating the anarchist society is not about a steady linear progression in a kind of structural way from a less anarchist to a more anarchist society, but rather we have to see that constantly there are various forms of anarchist type organisations and human relationships going on at various local levels, spontaneously, in different networks, and they go on the whole time, even beneath the surface of the state, however oppressive and dominant the state. And I think the way to see the anarchist struggle, if you want, is as a continuous sort of opening out and broadening out of these different forms of running our lives, different kinds of schools, different kinds of community, different forms of social institutions and so on. And that's attractive because it means that you can start at a very local level. You know, you can start by just reorganising your workplace or your classroom or a kind of community support group. And so I think it's sort of perhaps not the right question to ask. Are we moving towards a more anarchist society? But certainly I have seen some really impressive political movements that are committed to anarchist principles and operate in a very sort of committed anarchist way. I'm thinking particularly about one group that I've had some involvement with, and this is a group called Anarchists Against the War, that operate in the occupied territories in Palestine. And they are one of the few grassroots protest groups in Israel and Palestine that is genuinely bottom up, in the sense that it's just about going to the local community, developing with them forms of resistance and direct action and solidarity as a form of political protest. It's run in a very non-hierarchical way, and the forms of political action that they're engaged with are largely sort of traditional forms of direct action, passive resistance. And I think the very fact that they're different, both from the mainstream political system and from a lot of the opposition to the mainstream political system, means that they're quite threatening and challenging to the authorities, even though they're a very small group. The authorities often just sort of don't know what to do with it, because what they do is really just demonstrating that things can be very different. And they're committed to doing that in a way that completely operates at a local level, but challenges the very hierarchical structures and the dominant Zionist ideology that is oppressing people at that local level. And I'm sure there are other groups, that's just one I happen to know of. So I think the more people become aware of how dangerous and damaging some of the forms of political power that are out there are, and the more it's possible to resist those in ways that subvert the very values that constitute those forms of power, the more hope there is perhaps that people will form anarchist type networks and forms of solidarity and action.